Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas PInkevicius. Today's guest is Glenn Tompkins, an artist from Mesa, Arizona, who has always been fascinated by sound, textures, color, and atmosphere. Early in his life, he started to love music, having been drawn to such art by listening to his grandfather play the violin, harmonica, piano, organ, and mandolin. His uncle Walter gave him his 1930s Hohner accordion, which stimulated a lifelong fascination with the study of instrumental music. In the 1950s, his father provided for him to start music lessons at an accordion school in Bound Brook, New Jersey. From 1960 to 1965, he attended Middlesex High School and then went on to Drew University at Madison, New Jersey from 1965 through 1970. At Drew, he initially wanted to major in English, but subsequently decided to change his major to art. Somewhere around vicinity of the year 2000, some friends of his gave him a beautiful vintage Scandali accordion, 4/5 reed instrument, and the Scandali rekindled his abiding interest in acoustical music, allowing him to experiment with all sorts of tonal blends from those beautiful Italian reeds. And Glenn joined YouTube in 2009 and started making music videos to share with the worldwide community under the channel name From Holberg's Time. And previously he had not realized the potential for making new friends through the sharing of music, but quickly he could see the value of this imaginative and extensive network of musicians, fans, and music lovers. This chapter of his life has provided exceeding joy as he has rediscovered the positive attributes of folk music, traditional hymns, contemporary praise and worship, improvisation, classical music, gospel tunes, and popular melodies. We have connected through my postings and videos where Glenn frequently adds feedbacks and comments of various sorts, and he reads my blog and I read his blog, which you can find at funfairsandreveries.com. And in this conversation, Glenn and I talk about the poetry of organ music, what is important to any person, which is of course the value of any kind of creative endeavors, any kind of creation in any field. And I hope you will find so much inspiration from this conversation, because Glenn is a really practicing artist. He does not only creates his art and leaves it locked in his drawer, but he lets it out. He shares it with the world. He opens himself and is vulnerable to any kind of feedback. And he firmly believes that in order to be alive, to feel alive, you have to create. So let's go to the show and let's find out all there is to know about Glenn and his art and work and how it relates to the organ world and organ music. So Glenn, I'm so delighted to finally talk to you in person. After all these years we've been friends online and communicated via emails and comments, and I know I read your blog, and it's such a tremendous inspiration for people to read your insights, and I just feel that you're such a gift for people in your community, and not only in Arizona but globally too. So thank you so much for your time and effort and insights that I'm sure will be provided today. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
I'm very honored to be your guest, and I just appreciate everything that you're doing in music and arts and culture, Vidas. You have always been a great influence, I think, and I appreciate so much what you offer to your readers and to your listeners.
Great inspiration I receive from you also. Whenever I post a video or an article or a podcast, right, in these series, I feel such a anticipation that somewhere out in Arizona, Glenn is going to notice my work and probably will read or listen or watch, and he will have a comment or a feedback. I will get a feedback from him, which is very valuable. So thanks so much for doing this. It's tremendous. It's tremendous support that you are actually giving me, because let's face it, not too many people do that. From the my main group of readers, only small portion of people really do feedback and comment. But you are so consistent on your generosity of spreading this, paying it forward basically, and I hope our listeners already noticed you and your inspiring very poetic comments that you give. So we will talk about poetry in organ music today also, but for starters, I always like to ask people, how did they fell in love with the organ? Can you share this story with us, Glenn?
Yes. Originally, as a little boy, we had an electronic organ in the church, which is, of course, as you know, not quite as good as pipe organ. But on radio broadcasts and through long-playing records, I listened to the true sound of pipe organ. For example, Marcel Dupré came to visit New York City, I think around 1957 or 58, and he recorded a whole series of classical pieces on pipe organ. I think it was St. Thomas Church in New York City, and they broadcast some of these recordings over the radio. When I heard these recordings and when I became more familiar with the sound of the pipe organ, I was just transfixed. I had never heard a single instrument that had that kind of complexity and that kind of range. So when people use the appellation king of instruments, they are certainly speaking the truth. There isn't anything else, in my opinion, that can compare to the sound of the pipe organ. So my earliest experiences probably were through recording and radio broadcast. And then eventually I did, when I went to college, we went to Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City, and I did get to hear a very large pipe organ in person, which of course solidified my already great interest in the sound and the complexity of the pipe organ.
I'm so amazed that so many people really are inspired by the complexity, as you say, and that's really so true, right? Because when they see the inside of that instrument, I don't know if you really saw or just they heard the recording, but probably the recording was magnificent enough. But if people at the young age really get a glimpse on the mechanics of the organ, get inside how the bellows work and see the pipe work, that's usually something that they will never really forget, right? In many cases, and that might lead to really a career in organ too. So I'm so glad that someone introduced you to these recordings at a young age, and here we are, right? After all these decades, you're still in love with the organ. Can you?
I still do.
Right. So, Glenn, can you tell us why the organ is so fascinating to you after all these decades, after all these years? What are you finding in this instrument today?
Well, this is, of course, a very good question. I think there's a mystery about the sound of the pipe organ. There is, you've used the word poetry. I think that perhaps the pipe organ is the most poetic of all instruments, although there are many partisans who would say maybe violin or harp or maybe even harmonica, some people would say is a poetic instrument. To me, it's like there is no limit in the sounds and the textures, in the different manners in which you can present music on the pipe organ. And in your blogs, of course, you always point this out too. When you talk about modal plan, and you talk about changing the textures or changing the pace or the tempo, I have found myself that when I go too long on a piece and I don't change the texture, it becomes either boring or uninteresting. And I think maybe the listeners, as well as my own conscience, seems to lose sight of the end. But I like the fact that the organ has so many possibilities, from soft to forte and everything in between. It seems like you can tell stories. You can also just do an abstract piece. It can be sound for sound's sake. It can be music for art's sake. It seems to me that there is no combination that is impossible to find or to pursue. So in this sense, it's like, even when Ausra mentioned in one of your dual presentations in the video that it's like the organ is a person. And I like her assertion because it seems to me if you can see the human touch in an instrument, then you gravitate toward understanding it. It would be the same, let's say, with a violinist who cherishes his Stradivarius or other instrument, and he becomes one with it. I think it's the same with the organist. As we become more associated with the instrument, we become like an extension. The keyboard is an extension of our hands, extension of the heart, extension of the mind. And I see it as like a path. It's a path for expression. It's a path for productivity, for imagination. You have mentioned many times the idea of pipe organ encounters where you get children interested. You invite them to the church, you set everything up, and then they can come and see that you have enthusiasm for the instrument, and they can see that it has a wide range of voices to share and tempi to share and so on.
You mentioned that an organ is like a person, right? This idea, and I remember now that there is exactly a stop called vox humana on many organs, right? Vox humana, human voice, which imitates human voice, and specifically a choir, basically a choir. So when we think about symbolic meaning of that particular stop, it comes to my mind that each pipe is like a person, right, in a choir, and together all these pipes make wonderful harmony, right? And like in a choir, each person doesn't have to stand out or sing like in a solo range, but mostly they try to fit in and blend together to make more harmonious sounds. So don't you think this idea also relates to the idea of organ as a person?
Yes, I heartily agree. I think that there are dimensions of humanity in the pipe organ, and it only takes a sensitive person, either in the audience or the performer himself or herself, to elicit that humanity. It's like when you are a good listener, you have a sensitivity to touch and to harmonics and to the style that you present. And I think all great artists or all sensitive artists are very attuned to that. It's like they can see that the instrument has a personality. As you've gone around with Ausra to Latvia and Lithuania in your travels, as you play different organs and so on, I think also you were in France. Maybe it was the Church of the Madeleine where you played a beautiful, beautiful piece. And I think as you get to know the character of each instrument, you can draw and elicit from that instrument the best sounds, the best voices. But again, it takes a kind of sensitivity, because you're not going in saying, I don't care about the particular properties of this instrument. I'm going to do what I want to do. a really sensitive artist will say, let me see what the instrument is capable of doing, and let's see if I can combine my improvisation with the capabilities of the instrument to underscore the particular qualities of that particular organ.
Mm-hmm. You're right, Glenn. Whenever I play a new organ, I try to not to play a repertoire on it right away. I try to explore different sounds, different possibilities that this particular instrument can achieve, and usually, even in the ugliest instrument that you can find in many places in my country, for example, really there are very ugly instruments that no one really wants to play. But even in those places, there is at least one beautiful stop, usually 4-foot flute.
Yes.
So it's possible to play many beautiful melodies and harmonies on that 4-foot flute too. So you're right that people have to be sensitive, right? And do you think that this sensitivity is in sort of given, or is it acquired, like a skill?
It's an excellent question. I think that probably there will always be a debate or discussion over this issue. They used to say it's nature versus nurture. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably a little bit of both, a little bit of each. Because in a sense, if you have a musical mother or a musical father, or let's say an artistic mother or an artistic father, or maybe artistic siblings or musical siblings, that some of this will brush off on you. And as you have good educational system, that maybe you have a teacher that inspires you or encourages you, you will do more or less what your teacher expects of you, and so you may rise to the occasion. On the other hand, I think maybe there is some generational influence from the family or from your ancestry, that if there is music in and has been in your family for generations, probably you will pick up some of those genes and some of those characteristics in your personality. Of course, it's you could make a case for either one, but I think maybe there's just some truth in both being alive and certainly areas of potential artistic development.
Mm-hmm. You're right, Glenn. It's both, like given and acquired, like a skill. Have you met actually anyone who maybe has some artistic background in their family, but who is not really interested in art or music or specifically organ music?
I don't know if I can say that there's any particular example, but in my walks of life, I have found people who strangely don't have a curiosity about art or music. And that puzzles me, because to me it seems that each of us, we all have the opportunity to express ourselves. I did read a book one time that spoke about this idea of art and creativity maybe being a potential part of all of our lives. For example, the author of the book said, when anyone says to her that they are not an artist or that they are not a musician, she says, well, what about two things? What about your apartment where you live or your home where you live? Do you have a painting on the wall, or do you have artwork or a photograph? Do you have a specific style of draperies or curtains on the windows and on the walls of your home? And she says that's part of design. In order to do any sort of design, you must express yourself. The other subject, she says, well, when you get up in the morning, don't you decide what colors you will wear, what style of clothing you will wear, what type of shoe, what type of hat, and so on. And she says, well, that's part of being a designer, or that's essentially part of being creative or artistic. And I think that's a way to disarm the idea that some people have that they are not artistic or that they're not musicianly. In a sense, we all have the possibility to express ourselves. Another way might be to say there are artists and there are potential artists. There are musicians and there are potential musicians. Sometimes people need to be led into the stream And once they acquire the habit of, as you say, the practice daily, as your blogs stress, then maybe there becomes a lifelong love of music or a lifelong love of art, as in the paintings of your father. I've often thought that there's a wonderful relationship between you and your father. What your father has done in paintings, you are doing in music by describing a world that you see, and that you touch many people through this art, just as your father has touched many people through his paintings. So I like the voices that you use. There are areas in which a person will choose what seems natural to them, and I think perhaps that's what makes the best artist or the best musician, when you're doing things that come naturally to you.
Thank you so much, Glenn, for this piece of insight. And I think you are an artist too. You share your artwork online very regularly, either from early years or composed or created recently. It's so inspiring to see that you also try to notice things in the world, right, and try to recreate it in your drawings and your ink works. Can you tell us a little bit the inspiration behind your drawings and your artwork?
Yes, this is a very good question. Thank you, Vidas. I think that in a way, artists and musicians have a responsibility to show their response to life. If life is a gift, what do we give back? In the terms of a musician, maybe it's the idea that we want to show the richness of the canon, the richness of all the different varieties of romantic music and Baroque music and contemporary music and so on and so forth. In art, maybe it's the idea that we want to show others that we have a platform of expression which extends to the nth degree. There can be small dreams, there can be large dreams. And when we, for example, in pen and ink, which I admire your pen and ink drawings, Vidas, because these are like a counterpart to what you're doing with the organ and also with your blogging and your writing. They show a descriptive line. I remember people have, music critics have discussed the music of Jean Sibelius, his wonderful, wonderful symphonies. And someone once said, that, oh, you like the long line, that in Sibelius you follow his music. I think that maybe in art it's the same, that we find lines that express not only our response to life, but maybe characterize the response of other people's response to life, or describe their response to life. So there is like a sharing, and there's like an opening up of maybe things that would be ordinarily hidden or would be silent. We know that a musician brings to fore those things which would not be improvised or hidden by getting involved in a recital or simply playing maybe at home alone. And then with an artist, it's similar in the idea that when you start with a blank page. And then once you start, it's like ideas explode and you see relationships on the page that you're working on, or on the canvas, or on the drawing board. You see how things come together, and then it's like you sense there is a guiding direction to how all these textures and lines and rhythms and colors come together, especially if you're working in color. Sometimes it's fun to work in black and white, the monochromatic tones, but it's also uniquely expressive to work in color. And then you can use all the different shadings.
You're right, Glenn. You mentioned my drawings. I can tell you how they originated. Basically, they originate as ideas for the blog post that I write. Basically, whenever on a good day, for example, I think a lot about music, organ music, live. Sort of these creative ideas come each day, but many people sort of take it for granted and don't notice them. But if you notice what you notice, and if you notate it, for example, I earlier tried to keep a notebook and notate brief sentences of ideas that seemed worthy of a post or two in my, like a diary, right? Short idea. But then I thought, oh, maybe it could be a small drawing in addition to these words also. So that's how I started sketching or doodling, right? Basically, that really helps to free up some imagination also, and helps to acquire a certain state of mind which is required also to create.
Yes, I agree totally. And what I like is that it makes for a rich media expression. For example, we are reading your literary skills through the blog. We are seeing the video presentations of your improvisations, and then maybe classical pieces that you're playing, either with Ausra or solo. And then we are also seeing the drawings of Vidas and the artwork of Vidas. So it makes for a rich impact. It's like you can't say that this is one-dimensional. It's many sides of dimension that we get to see, maybe some insight into your personality, and we are maybe helped also to understand concepts. You have a very rich way of illustrating concepts, and also you bring humor into the picture. You make us laugh sometimes, and you say, like, I think you said one time, you even, when you're improvising, you scare yourself. Well, I think maybe you show us that there is no bounds, to what the visual artist is doing, as well as maybe the musical artist, that you're breaking down barriers, but you're making a safe place for expression. And this is like, it's a virtuosity, but it's very human. We can see, these are the extensions of the personality. These are like the patterns of where you've been and what you've experienced. They are, in a sense, almost like the various voices of the organ, and they're all being drawn upon. Or in the drawings, in the visual art, we are seeing, these are like the textures of your life, the textures of your ideas. And I'm thrilled with what you're doing. And then, like, your latest example, where you're using, like, these literary titles, I like this, and then you're doing, like, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And I like this because you can focus on something, and you're not tied down for a very long piece of time. So it's refreshing. And it begins to activate the idea that you can do a very imaginative and virtuosic piece in just a short space of time. And you can illustrate with your ideas how you formulate this music and how you formulate your blog posts. The visual content is very stimulating, Vidas. And I think that sometimes these are some of the most magnificent parts of what you're sharing with everyone. Because I think it takes a lot of, what should we say, boldness at times, especially when you're blogging and you're doing things that are kind of funny, with the different animals that you're doing, and sometimes it's like, it's a very contemporary feel, but it's like almost self-deprecating humor where you can laugh at yourself and you can laugh at life. And I think this makes you an endearing figure. It's like we can understand the artist, we can understand the musician, we can understand the writer. But then when you help us to laugh, you're showing us the humanity behind all of these different arts and all of this varied part of culture.
Thank you so much, Glenn. It's so kind, and this humor sometimes it's all it takes really to liven someone else's day, right? And
yes,
I find the best humor as a irony. auto irony. Basically, if I'm in a stressful situation, and if I can come and see myself from a different angle, and which makes a little bit of a humorous, then this situation is no longer stressful at all. It's part of the human condition, right? And I was so delighted when our paths crossed a few years ago to find out more about you, and I visited your blog, Fanfares and Reveries, right? And I found out you are a blogger too. You are not only a blogger, actually. You are an artist making ink drawings and etchings of various sorts, right? And you also are a fantastic improviser on the accordion, right? You are doing all those things that I'm doing on a different medium, or sometimes on the same medium, and you also share those ideas to the world. So I thought, wow, such a generous and poetic soul. I was really drawn to find out more about you. So for me, Glenn, the good day is when I notice things and I notate and I draw and I share, right? All those things.
Yes.
What is the good creative day for you?
Well, I guess when I actually sit down and do a drawing that I'm pleased with, or when I actually take the time to do an improvisation where I feel I have closely come to a proper musical description of what I wanted to share. Sometimes I miss the mark. I know a composer friend of mine told me that because the accordion has limited dynamic range, he feels that 8 or 9 minutes is probably the most you can go. I asked him for his opinion one time when I went maybe 13 minutes, maybe almost 14 minutes, and he gave me a truthful answer, and he told me it's very difficult to ask people to sit that length of time. For pipe organ, it's different. You can listen definitely to an hour or even more and not reach a kind of overload effect. But I do agree, and I've learned, and also from your blogs, I've learned, that things have to be more varied in terms of either pace or texture and maybe even mood, because you can't expect your listeners to be seated there listening to a piece that I think you said one time, if your improvisation is over but you continue to play. I recognize, that's true. I have been guilty of that at times. But we learn, don't we? I mean, we learn from our mistakes, and then hopefully we can go on to do better. And so to answer your question, it's when I actually either sit down to do a drawing that I'm pleased with, or when I actually will do an improvisation, or when I will play either a classical piece or a folk piece and then be pleased with it. I'm not always pleased with it. In fact, I think probably quite a few of my postings probably should be deleted, but I leave them there so that maybe I can continue to learn from them. And most people are kind. Most people give very nice feedback. There are some difficult people on YouTube and on Google Plus who might leave a critical mark or an uncalled for nasty remark, but usually they're in the minority, and most people are very appreciative because maybe they don't play an instrument, or maybe they don't have this kind of infatuation with improvisation. So I can't always let's say blame people for making a critical comment, but I appreciate very much the genuine comments of appreciation. They seem to stimulate and encourage you, and they help to maybe widen our awareness to realize that we have friends all around the world. Accordionists are very loyal people. There's so many very, very good people I've met. Argentina, Italy, Europe, and Latin America are very strongholds for accordion music. The pipe organ, of course, is very much enthusiastically received around the world. But it is, I think, probably going through somewhat of a difficult time in that instruments are expensive to maintain, and many congregations are small and don't have the funds to continue to keep an organ in good shape. We had a 3-manual electronic instrument in our church, but it was given away because no one was playing it. And that's sad. It's sad because the organ adds so much to church service, and it's an edifying instrument. I think, you've pointed out in many of your blogs too, and in your videos, that there are centuries of historical precedents in organ playing. And it's an art form that is treasured, not only in Europe, but throughout the world. There's more and more people, I think, that are very much interested in improvisation, even just as a listening audience. Here in Mesa, they have had, what do they call it? It's a marathon concert. And that's really nice. Where hour after hour you have all these different organists that come in. It's sponsored by the American Guild of Organists. And you hear such a wide range of music and styles. The only disconcerting thing is that the audience is so small. Mm-hmm. You could count, sometimes on 2 hands the numbers of people in the audience. I would hope that maybe there would be a change and that there would be more people interested in coming to organ recitals. You're doing a whirlwind job of creating interest, I think, in not only improvisation, but organ, in performance and recitals. And you consistently give encouragement to not only the performers, but for the audience, and for those who even have an inkling of a desire to hear this instrument in its proper acoustical setting. So in this sense, you are a great partisan for organ and organ music, and even for organ audiences and organ appreciation. I don't know anyone who really can fit that category as you do. I used to think like Michel Chapuis was my most favorite improviser, but I would have to say that you're my most favorite improviser, and I'm very impressed with what you have done. It's like I've not heard anyone else who can play for an hour and sustain interest in whatever subject matter you are describing. And that's rare. There are probably between 5 or 10, very well-known, internationally recognized improvisers. Many of them are showcased, for example, on some of the international CDs and DVDs. The one on Cavaillé Cole, which was presented by Fugue State Films. It's one of my favorite CD, DVD compilations. But I would have to say, Vidas, you have an outstanding collection of performances that thrill and encourage all of us, because you're describing this language that almost has no limit, and you're doing it consistently well. I've never heard any of your performances which flag or which miss the mark. They all go to the heart. They all stimulate the mind. And in this respect, you're one of the rarest organists I have heard that has this ability to do sustained 1-hour compositions with complete integrity throughout. Never a loss of focus, never a loss of intensity. And I admire that greatly.
Thank you so much, Glenn. But you are really too kind. You are exaggerating my probably talent and everything. But you're right about keeping audiences interest, right, and attention sustained for 1 hour. It's not easy, but it can be done, and it can be also done on the accordion as well. I can tell you how. The most critical part on any organ improvisation or composition is, of course, the mental state of the performer.
Yes.
mental.
Yes.
You could play spectacular Vidor toccatas and Carillon of Westminster by Vierne, right? And toccata in D minor by Bach, and beautiful chorale preludes by Bach, O Mensch Bewein and Nun komm, and all these things that we love for 1 hour. But if an organist lacks total focus, attention, and attention span is very limited, like for a chicken, right? Then guess what happens? Our audience is also bored, is also feeling neglected, and try to go to sleep, right? And so it doesn't matter that accordion doesn't have tremendous amount of color possibilities as organ does, right? But it also has some stops, right, on the accordion, on the nice antique accordions that you play. It also does, a few of them at least. So I find myself in a situation whenever I practice it on my own, for example, in the church, in the same St. John's Church at Vilnius University. I don't practice it very loud, because the church is very popular among tourists, and they come and go, and guides for these tourists have to speak and guide and point numerous cultural artifacts which are in this church, and my loud playing would really sometimes interfere with their stories. So what I do, I really improvise for an hour, non-stop music on my own, but on just one single flute. And this is my exercise to keep my own attention without the bells and whistles, those showmanship additional, which is of course wonderful if you have fanfares and reeds and loud and soft dynamic ranges. But if you can sustain your own interest for an hour with one flute, no one can say that it's boring. So the same can be done on the accordion, Glenn, too.
So you don't think 13 or 14 minutes is too extravagant for accordion?
The sky is the limit, Glenn. It always is.
Well, that's encouraging to hear you say that, because you have a lot of influence on what I think is achievable. You certainly encourage me and you inspire me.
But I will tell you this: I'm not a guru of any kind, right? I'm not a saint or a supernatural being which can sustain attention for hours and hours, right? Like Buddhist monk or lama of some point. No, I'm a regular human being trying to practice this thing for 1 hour, and what happens sometimes, I do lose some focus, right? But I still continue to play and still continue to push myself to be in the present moment. And whenever, for example, I play for an hour in public for a recital, I have a watch, a timer next to me, so that I would know when to finish. Because if I don't have the timer, I can play for 2 hours, and that's a little bit too much, because the format is usually 1 hour. So I try to be gentle with people's limits of curiosity. How far they can sit in one place for 1 hour is good. So what I do is sometimes I do look at the watch for a second or two, and I find myself that the less I look, the better I play.
Yes.
And in the earliest recitals that you see on YouTube, I'll tend to look every 10 minutes, and how much time, left. Oh, it's so boring. I have to play more interesting now. 20 minutes left. Good. Now, more excitement, more reads. Okay, and today I find that it's possible to be in one place, in one mood, in one focused attention, mental state for at least half an hour. And after half an hour, I usually make a quick glance and then continue to play afterwards too. So the same can be said about accordion too. If you are focusing well enough, your organist will focus too.
I agree with you, and sometimes I feel like there are moments when I'm inspired, and then there are moments when I'm not inspired. If I'm inspired, I can play for a great length of time, and it seems like interest will not flag as long as that focus can be maintained. But if I drift, I know that I can catch myself, and then maybe I get into areas that are either difficult or they don't make sense. There is no harmony, there is no flow of one idea to another idea. And it does help to have constructive criticism. I have a friend who played pipe organ. She's a very good instrumentalist. She knows music theory. And she told me which one she thought was the best improv. And I thought that's very nice. When you have a friend who can solidify an opinion and help you to understand what is your best work, what is maybe less than your best work. It's good to hear a truthful assessment.
Well, exactly, and the feedback you receive from listeners around the globe is sometimes really, really helpful. But as you say, sometimes critical comments can really be discouraging to you, right? So I also sometimes receive criticism that I feel is not really helpful for my own development, and I shut myself off usually from those people, because let me tell you this short story. At one point in a few years ago, just when I was starting online, I posted a video of myself playing Messiaen's Ascension for the organ, the 4-part Ascension cycle. And one of the I think on the second part, or the third part, the loud and fast part, it wasn't very clear playing. A few wrong notes, I think, was present, and you could hear that. But I still posted it anyway because the organ was very nice and was built by Gene Beatty, and my mentor and friend from Lincoln, Nebraska, who is now retired. And this organ was at I think United Methodist Church, in Lincoln, Nebraska, St. Paul's United Methodist Church, and basically very French style and very good for that instrument. But that person who criticized me and pointed out that if I teach other people how to play the organ without mistakes, shouldn't I myself play without mistakes, at least online?
Yeah.
And I felt, oh yes, great, thank you so much for this. You're very kind. Can you please show me your work? Can you point me to your videos that I could be inspired by your flawless performances?
Excellent point, Vidas, and that puts everything into proper perspective.
And guess what happened? That person disappeared.
Yes.
Because those critics, they usually are trolls, basically. That's what they're called. They are anonymous critics, and they maybe dream sometimes of playing, great pieces, or they imagine they have great insights, right, and the great perspective to share, and they understand between good and bad playing. I don't doubt it, but they themselves usually haven't done the homework,
Yes.
right?
This is very wise on your part, Vidas, and I totally agree with what you're saying here. Sometimes it just takes a kind of forgiving attitude to say, this person, for whatever reason, they're deciding to be a critic, and as you say, they really are not capable of achieving similar levels of performance, and so maybe this is what stimulates their mind or stimulates their personality. But it's a destructive thing, and they are not really appreciated for maintaining that type of perspective.
And Glenn, of course, you are yourself a great artist, like other people who are sharing the work. That's the most the bravest thing I ever seen artists do is share, because sharing is very underrated and feels kind of vulnerable, right? You feel sort of giving your best work out online for people to make comments and give feedback, and sometimes that feedback hurts, right? But you still are open to that feedback if they wanted to give, and you don't know which of your works or videos will elicit some kind of feedback or not. You just share, right? Give it to the world. You ship it, and as a former postman, you know what it means to ship, right?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that.
It's very, very important. If you don't ship, nothing happens, right? People don't receive letters, messages, gifts, parcels, and everything that comes with it. You have to ship.
I just have to say that what you are saying now is like the crux of the matter, that all artists, all writers, all musicians, we have this desire that we want to communicate something. We want to share something, as you have so graciously said. And there is some fear of rejection, but that must be overcome. It must be overcome because if you never venture outside of your house, you don't learn anything. You would be cutting yourself off. You would become like a monk sitting underneath a bridge somewhere. And I like the idea that you say that sharing is part of our nature as artists and as musicians, as writers. I think this would extend also to those who act on the stage or those who dance, those who are in any of the arts, that initially when you are exposing your art, there is the danger that there will be critics. There is probably every possibility there will be a certain amount. But also what bowls me over at times is that there are people who are so gentle. There are people who are so loving, so affectionate with their nice comments. Sometimes they can even be maybe too nice, or like they can maybe say things that we would say, well, that's almost hyperbole. I'm not that good, or I'm not an expert. I'm not a world-class artist. I'm just a functioning artist. But I think that when you receive the positive feedback, it can be so engaging, it can be so encouraging, it's inspirational, and it helps us maybe to go on to the next piece, to the next drawing, the next improv, the next recital, whatever it is that we're planning on. And these people that are consistently enthusiastic, they are gracious people. I think in a way it's like a gift from God that people have, or maybe they themselves do not play such an instrument, or they themselves are maybe not a visual artist, but they like what they see and they're extremely enthusiastic about it. And at times we look at the feedback and we say, I never realized that I could have such an impact. And so how awful it would be if I had done a preemptive strike and say to myself, I'm not going to share this because I don't think anyone will appreciate it or understand it. These abstract pieces are probably going to be looked down upon, or these improvisations won't be understood. It's uncanny the number of times I have seen people just go on a glowing commentary about something that I thought wasn't that good. And it helps me to understand that people perceive things differently. And what I think is some of my only mediocre work is sometimes praised for being something that awakens the audience or that the audience appreciates. And I find that's both humbling and it's both extremely gratifying because it shows that there is some return for our art. There is some return for your improvs, for your drawings, for your blog posts, and then perhaps also on a smaller scale for what I've been doing. And those are like written testaments. These are like things that you might say are in the stars or in the hills, and they're there waiting to be discovered. And it only takes a person to have the proper heart, the proper mind, the proper patience to see and distill those things and bring them to the fore so that maybe a worldwide audience would become more aware of these artistic perspectives and insights.
You're absolutely right, Glenn, about that. That an artist really has to share, because otherwise you're just a painter, right?
Yes.
You're not an artist yet, unless you share. If you keep your best work in the attic or somewhere, right, or an organist keeps practicing in the practice room at home, for example, and no one really hears, no one interacts with that art. It's not art yet. It's
Yes.
not. It has to have interaction with another human being, at least one, in order to become an art, in order to make an impact on people. So, but people sometimes have this fear, right? Fear of rejection, as you say, of failure. What if I give myself pour my entire heart, and other people will make fun of me, right? They will say,
Yes.
"Oh, you don't have talent, you don't have technique, you don't have anything what it takes," right? And people, it's a real fear. But you know what?
Yes.
At the end of the day, when there comes the time for all of us to go to another world, right? After our here physical journey is over, I've read an article from a nurse who takes care of these patients, who takes care of patients in about 3 or 6 months before they die.
Yes.
She will interact with them and make their ending basically easier. She interacts with them and asks what are the biggest regrets people have on their deathbed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this article is online actually, and I've read that few fears and regrets are such great importance at that point of the journey, but one is that I worked too hard. That's especially true for men.
Yes.
I worked too hard. Then number 2 is I didn't spend enough time with my friends and family.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Number 3 is I didn't live my life the way I wanted, and instead I lived the life that others wanted from me.
Yes.
You know, didn't pay attention to my heart, basically. And there was one more, which actually was the most prominent, that I let my songs be unsung.
Wow, yeah.
You know, this is the profound statement that something inside us, all of us probably, have to come out before
Yes.
we
Yes.
die. And if we don't let it to come out at the end of the day, at the end of the life, we will have this tremendous regret, and we will not have enough time to do that anymore. And we will have to find out for ourselves, of course, what that thing means to us personally. What is this song about? Maybe that's organ music, maybe accordion improvisation, maybe paintings, maybe poetry, maybe some kind of creative endeavor. I'm not only saying about art in traditional perspective, but could be a business venture too, something created from your mind, some kind of software or application for you dying to come out, right? If you are a computer person. But if person is so afraid of rejection and failure that he or she will shut the doors and the curtains and any feedback from the world, and will not ship it, will not share it, then at the end of the life and at the end of the day, that will be the biggest regret of their lives, to have their songs unsung.
I agree with you. You've eloquently stated that, Vidas. You have really underscored this idea that we should not come to the end of our lives grieving over the fact that we never let out that feeling of sharing or that idea of sharing. That would be tragic. So sometimes it's maybe later in our life that we gain a little bit more boldness, or we are not so afraid. I remember at one time I was deathly afraid of public speaking, and I would refuse to get up in front of any audience. 5 people, 6 people, 100 people, I would not do it. And then something changed in my heart, and I actually began to, it was probably related to church and Sunday school and missions. I began to actually be enthusiastic about getting in front of people and sharing some ideas, or reading scripture, or introducing a song on the accordion, or playing with the children in Sunday school. And it changed everything, because it seemed like the one thing that I was most afraid of is now one of the things that I most enjoy. And I wonder if that isn't true also for music and art. That some people say, well, I can't draw and I can't paint. I encourage people, try something. If you have an idea, see if you can illustrate that idea. And the same with music. I mean, you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be the world's greatest improviser. You can just set some patterns down on an instrument, and it can be very simple. And yet you have, at the end of the day, you have expressed yourself. And you have, I think also, you have made the world a better place, because you never know who will see that or witness that and find it encouraging, will find it stimulating, will find it uplifting. We live in a world where we need the uplifting of our spirit, and I think that musicians and artists have a calling to do that. There is no greater calling, to my mind, than to continue producing art and producing music, and doing it also with a humble attitude, with a very quiet heart. Simply saying, "This is the music that God has given me. This is the artwork that God has given me, and I want to share it with as many people before I pass away."
Well, Glenn, it's really hard to put better into words what you have described, and people around the world, I think will get this message, this inspiration from our conversation so much that at least they will try not to be as terrified, as you say, of public speaking or painting or drawing or reading poetry or making any kind of artistic ideas and letting them out, right? And in organ terms, for organ music, right? Improvisations, all these things that we love. So, Glenn, of course, we could really talk for hours, but of course your time is limited, and I'm so I'm very positive we will meet again and talk about other ideas in the future. But for the closing part of our conversation, can you give our listeners a link where they can find you and your wonderful drawings, posts, articles, and improvisational videos and other pieces of art that you make online.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity, Vidas. My website and blog is at www.fanfaresandreveries.com. Those are all lowercase. And there is a link there at the website to go to my YouTube channel, which is From Holberg's Time. I'm also on Twitter, Glenn R. Tompkins, at Mesa Artist, and I'm also on Facebook. And in fact, that's maybe how I have contacted you a lot, through Facebook. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the online community and social media. It's a way for us to get our ideas across and to increase our audience, I think, in many respects, and to share ideas as you're doing now. You're very generous to give so many of us this opportunity to share ideas. I really appreciate you, Vidas. If I ever have the opportunity, I would love to fly to Lithuania and see you in person. If you ever come to the United States, it would be great if you could visit Arizona. There are some unique places here that I think probably would generate some Vidas improvisations on the 64-stop organ at St. John's Church.
Fantastic, Glenn. I have a feeling that we'll meet again. And before we really close our conversation now for real, my closing question to you is this. What is number one thing you wish you knew before you had started your creative journey, when you were young, for example, in your early days? What is the most important thing that would have helped you, that you know now? Can you share that?
This is a very good question, Vidas. You are a musical genius to ask this question. I think it would have to be, I never realized the power, the joy, and the satisfaction of doing my own music. I had lessons when I was a young man, and I think it was probably 1959 through 1962, and then I dropped the instrument from 65 to 2000. 35 years I didn't play. And then I didn't start actually improvising until 2009. What is that, 6 or 7 years ago? It would have been so enlightening in the 1950s if I realized that I could improvise. Maybe it never occurred to me. I thought, well, that's for the great artists and the great intellects. But now I realize it's a language that's so personal. I don't see why everyone doesn't improvise. If not on an instrument, maybe with art or dancing or on the stage, acting and so on, or even blogging. I don't think there's anything wrong with improvisation. In fact, I would actually say, I hope it's not overstating it, but I would say it's one of the highest language arts that I have been able to express myself in. I've never seen another language that can compare with it. I used to love poetry, and I still do. I used to love the visual arts, and I still do. But when it comes to direct, deepest communication, I always feel like it's a celestial experience to spend 10, 20, 30 minutes improvising something that occurs to me that would be worth sharing. And to me, that's a revelation, Vidas, because, as I say, I never even concerned myself with improvisation. I thought it was for others. So you can imagine 40, 50, 60 years of possibilities. But then maybe this is what I have now since 2009, which is good enough. Mm-hmm. And, to know you, for example, to share with you, to know some, Jan Carmen, Stephen Monrotis, Sietz de Vries, the kinds of people that you have been sponsoring the podcasts and that you regularly associate with. Ausra, her wonderful duets with you, and then the conversations she has when you post these. I'm still learning, so I'm still like the student. Let's see, in 1959 I was 12 years old. And maybe in certain respect I'm still 12 years old. I'm still learning, still gravitating towards a greater understanding. And maybe that's the way it should be, that we're always in the process of learning. As you just said, process or perfection is a process, and you said you liked that. Somebody on one of your blogs put that as a comment. I agree. That's nice. We are in the process of being perfected. So maybe we never really achieve perfect perfection, but maybe that's the way that the Lord God has set things up, that we are striving to do our best, and that we realize, we have limitations, but still we communicate with one another, we inspire one another, we educate one another. And for these kinds of things, I could never really repay you. I might, I don't even know if I should say this, but I have thought of dedicating a piece to you, either in art or in music. But you have to imagine, it's intimidating for a relatively unknown guy like me to dedicate a piece to, a world-class organist. I think it's a possibility, and I would say it comes genuinely from my heart. But you have to realize that I tremble when I think, you might not like it, or it might not be suitable. I think it's just something that occurs to me, that's all. It's an idea.
Of course, Glenn, what you're saying, you have to realize that it's intimidating to me to hear such praises for the work I do for 1 hour or more. So please be more critical of my work too, because I'm sure you have some ideas that you're not telling me that could be improved. For example, something that you would like to hear more of, or what you don't understand, or something. I'm very, very open for real, genuine, generous criticism. So that's from that perspective. But thank you so much, at any rate, for being so honest and inspiring and encouraging for people from all walks of life, and basically all generations. If you are 12 years old or 72 years old, it doesn't matter. As long as you're alive, as long as you're breathing, you still can create something, let it out, right? And that's the most important thing, I guess.
You're a very gracious man, and I am honored to enjoy your friendship, Vidas. You're very kind, and I really appreciate this opportunity to share with you. You have helped to clear the air of a lot of ideas, and in this sense, you're a very valuable friend. You're a very valuable artist, a very valuable musician.
But likewise, Glenn, you're so tremendously inspiring and valuable to me, to my work also, because from this conversation I will get 20 blog post ideas at least, right? And I'm sure you will get a few of them yourself. And I think people around the world will be dying to get to your fanfares and reveries.com website and blog, and to listen and to hear and to enjoy your writings and artwork and improvisation for themselves. And I encourage them to do that right now.
Vidas, thank you for your thoughtfulness and your generosity. I will always hold you in high regard. And, if possible one day, if we could meet, that would be tremendous. It would be like a lifelong ambition. And I don't know what else to add to the conversation. It's just, this has been a great highlight to be able to do this. I actually thought I would never have the opportunity to speak to you one-on-one with your busy schedule and your touring and your concerts and recitals. So this shows me the type of man you are. See, in the same way that your father reached so many through visual art, you are through conversation, writing blogs, artwork, and musical videos. You are reaching people, and you're making a difference in the world. If you touched me, you have touched thousands. And I can only say that this is work that is held in the highest regard. I'm very pleased, and I'm very honored, believe me, very honored to spend time with you like this. It shows your character.
And of course, Glenn, you touched me. And if you touched me, you touched thousands as well. So we're even, right? Great. So have a tremendous creative year ahead of you and stay brave and healthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vidas.
If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog Secrets of Organ Playing at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas PInkevicius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.